Hello and welcome to Recap Radio. I'm Diego Cupolo, editor-in-chief of Turkey Recap, and this is our live show about Turkish politics and foreign policy. Today I'm talking to Seda Demiralp, a professor of political science and chair of international relations at Ishik University in Istanbul. Thanks for joining us, Seda.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So late last week, Turkish prosecutors requested official permission to investigate Mansur Yavaş, the Ankara mayor with the main opposition Republican People's Party, which we'll call CHP. He's one of the CHP's most popular mayors. He appeals to both secular and nationalist voters. And polls suggest Yavaş could beat President Recep Tayyip Erdogan in head-to-head elections. But it remains an open question if he's going to be allowed to run. Will Yavaş face the same fate as Istanbul Mayor Ekrem Imamoğlu? And will he face jail time? In this podcast, we're going to talk about the state of Turkey's opposition and we welcome questions from the live audience. Sorry, my internet's bugging out. So we aim to talk about 30 minutes. Seda, I'm going to pass it to you. Do you think that this potential investigation into Yavaş could see him landing in jail?
Well, the level of uncertainty in Turkish politics is so high lately that it's really hard for anyone to guess what's going to happen or, how to read some of those signals or how serious to take some of those threatening signals. But I would say that it wouldn't be rational for incumbent groups to have Mansur Yavaş in jail or to send him to jail. I think the jailing of Ekrem İmamoğlu already backfired on the incumbent coalition. I mean, at the social base, the votes of CHP have been increasing since March 19. In fact, the arrest of Imamoğlu created like an election type environment where even the undecided voters took a position. And yes, some of them took a position on the incumbent side. So our party also increased its votes a little bit, but CHP increased its votes a lot more dramatically. So that means for undecided voters or swing voters, the impact of Ekrem İmamoğlu, it pushed them more towards the opposition. I think arrest of Mansur Yavaş would have an even stronger impact on swing voters. Not only would it consolidate opposition voters more, it would push undecided or swing voters more towards the opposition. And even, I would think, even maybe lead to defections on the part of the incumbent voters, because we know that Mansur Yavaş has a high rating even among incumbent voters. So, I mean, that's the main difference between Mansur Yavaş and Ekrem İmamoğlu. And Ekrem İmamoğlu has been a figure that could mobilize opposition, excite the opposition. So those were his muscles. Good campaigning, good emotional power. But Mansur Yavaş, his strong side was that his support base has always been wider than Ekrem İmamoğlu even. So some people in 2023, if you remember, people talked a lot about who the strongest face in the opposition was, like who was stronger. And a lot of people who did not want Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu to run, they suggested either Ekrem İmamoğlu or Mansur Yavaş should run for the opposition. And so around that time, we compared and contrasted these figures a lot. And some people were concerned that Mansur Yavaş could not be as successful as Ekrem İmamoğlu during an election campaign. So during the election campaign, if he was to run, his support rate maybe could not be sustainable, but otherwise he was very popular. So if he would get arrested, I mean, he would not have the disadvantages of, like he's not a very performative figure, right? I mean, he's not someone who performs too well in front of cameras, right? But his arrest would make that unimportant. His name would be the focus. He will be in jail. He will not be talking. He will not face any disadvantages of not being a very performative person. And his name has a positive resonance among white voter base, so that would increase further. So I don't think a lot of AKP supporters would find that rational. But of course, who knows?
Mm-hmm. To give a little bit more context, Yavaş and the Ankara municipality are facing investigations on the misuse of public funds over concerts that were allegedly lavishly financed, overfinanced. And there's been different people detained. And I think early Saturday, we got news about this looming investigation into Yavaş. And he said he's ready to voluntarily give a statement because he has nothing to hide, basically. Do you think that this continued pressure on the main CHP figures could shake up party strategy? Because I think a week or two ago, CHP chair Özgür Özel said, if Imamoğlu can't run as president, we have Yavaş. Now Yavaş is facing an investigation. Is this just a whack-a-mole situation where whoever gets pointed to gets hit with an investigation?
Well, it is becoming less and less important who will run for CHP if there will be elections, right? And especially if Mansur Yavaş is arrested. I mean, with Ekrem İmamoğlu's arrest, his I would say his charisma, in a way, was transferred to whoever will be CHP's leader or a candidate, right? Whether it's Özgür Özel or Mansur Yavaş. So I think both Özel's and Mansur Yavaş's popularity increased because they also adopted some of Ekrem İmamoğlu's power, in a way, or popularity was transferred to those. So if Mansur Yavaş is arrested, then his charisma and popularity will be transferred to whoever will run for CHP. So it's accumulating, So before, people who supported Ekrem İmamoğlu and those who supported Mansur Yavaş sometimes would get in disagreements. They would prioritize one person over the other. But with Ekrem İmamoğlu's arrest, that conflict disappeared, right? We measured that too. I mean, we did a survey lately. I'm not very lately, but has been, I think, 2 months ago. So before, people who supported Ekrem İmamoğlu and people who supported Mansur Yavaş we could talk about like separate groups. Lately, though, I mean, after the arrest, so from March to May, that gap disappeared. So now people who like Ekrem İmamoğlu and those who like Mansur Yavaş, they overlap. They are the same people, And people who don't like Ekrem İmamoğlu also don't like Mansur Yavaş now. It wasn't like that before. Is that clear? I mean, so the two figures approached each other in the hearts and minds of the voters. That's very important. That shows that internal cleavages in the opposition decline. People's perception of such cleavages also decline. So it's March 19 has been having a consolidating impact on voters. That's what it says, and we see that also simply by comparing how people perceive these different figures. So, and Mansur Yavaş, I mean, he's some people, like I told you, criticize him for not being very performative, or some of his policies in Ankara municipality sometimes get criticism. People criticized the transportation or other problems, water, access to water, but honesty is one of his muscles. I mean, he's known as a decent, honest figure, and accusing him of corruption, I really don't think it would stick to him. And besides, like, people believe that these trials are politically motivated, and that's what matters for a lot of people. So people don't ask whether there was really corruption. Even in Istanbul, and in the case of Istanbul, corruption, doubts about corruption are higher. So even some of the people who support Ekrem İmamoğlu or who support CHP, they will say these trials are politically motivated, and yet, yeah, I do think that I do not eliminate the possibility that there was corruption, but that's not very important for people because they think corruption is a general structural problem, and accusing only CHP mayors of corruption is proof that these trials are politically motivated. That makes people angry. I think that impact will be stronger in the case of Mansur Yavaş, who's known to be an honest figure. That is the main characteristics of his personal brand.
You mentioned some research or a survey. Is this publicly available?
No, not yet.
Okay. Can you give any hints on where to look for it?
We're writing an article, academic article, so people have to wait a little bit more. And we write like short pieces. I'll share some, but the details will come with the publication.
Okay, teaser. We're giving a teaser. At the same time, while we're having these investigations unfold on CHP figures for about a year now, right? We've seen different CHP mayors face serious investigations. Özgür Özel, the party chairman, has been leading pretty much nonstop weekly rallies to stand up for democracy and bring people together, and also take those photos, show those videos that there is an opposition that comes together in Turkey, which I think has response. It's some kind of countering effect to this pressure, right? But the most recent one was in Brussels, the first international democracy protest. What do you make of Özel's leadership, and what do you make of his jump to bring this to the international stage?
Okay. If I heard you correctly, you're asking about both the rallies, right? And
yes,
comments
his
and
leadership, and then international
yeah.
aspect of it.
Yeah, his leadership, I could talk about it based on evidence. We founded this emotics lab at Işık University, Emotions and Politics Lab, and we are conducting focus group studies regularly on a regular basis. And the last one was in July, late July, early August, and that is published, so I could easily share that with you on the emotics website. So, we did look at how swing voters perceive some of the important issues, including corruption allegations towards the opposition, and the peace process, and a couple other issues too. So about the March 19 arrests and corruption allegations, one of the things that people frequently brought up was that, and remember, these are not opposition voters, these are swing voters and undecided voters. A lot of them said they wanted Özgür Özel to show more muscles. People typically thought that the trials were politically motivated, so they weren't asking who's right and who's wrong. That wasn't really a question mark. So they did side with the opposition about these trials. They did think that the trials did not seem fair, but they also want to see who will win in this fight. For some people, when they're trying to take a position, it's not just about who's right and who's wrong, but also about who's going to win. And people don't want to stick with a leader who's not going to be able to fight or continue the fight long enough. Like, if I'm going to support you, I want to know that you'll be resilient and you'll continue pushing back. So otherwise, it's a risk. Simply voting for someone and that person not winning, it feels like a risk. People feel it's an emotional risk too, not just political risk, but emotional risk too. People are tired of feeling not feeling like they have an influence, right? Political apathy, for instance, political apathy, withdrawal from politics is sometimes a defense mechanism where people try to protect themselves from that risk of repeatedly showing some political effort, voting, or sharing a view, but that not bringing any impact. So that is pushing people from outside of politics. So some of the undecided voters are actually also like apathetic voters, like they either didn't vote or they do vote, but they also try to keep a distance to politics. They would like to support a leader only if they think that leader is ready to fight. So those rallies are, in a way, giving that feeling to the people that he is gonna fight, he's not gonna surrender. And if you remember, that's one of the main criticisms. That was one of the main criticisms Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu, the former CHP leader, faced. Like, people were disillusioned, disappointed by his unwillingness to confront the AK Party or the incumbent coalition enough, even though, like, rhetorically he would criticize Erdogan frequently. A lot of people think that actually he was too submissive and he, in a way, cooperated with the incumbent coalition. So Özel now is, I think, restoring, fixing that trauma among the voters by showing muscles, by showing willingness to fight, resilience. The only one problem, I think, with these rallies is that they are distracting Özel or CHP from talking about the party's vision. That's another thing that keeps coming in these focus group meetings, for instance. I mean, people do think these trials, a lot of people do think these trials are politically motivated. I would say the majority of the population, based on our survey. I mean, the focus groups obviously are not representative, but I could back that statement with my survey data. Majority of the population think these trials are politically motivated, but for AKP voters, that's not necessarily a reason to defect. For undecided voters, they do think these trials are politically motivated. They do feel sympathy towards CHP for objecting these injustices, these trials. But they also say, all right, but what else is CHP putting on the table? What else is there for us? I mean, yeah, we would like to live in a more fair, transparent political environment. But beyond that, about the economy, for instance, I mean, people want to hear, because CHP announced its presidential candidate in March, right? They announced that Özgür Özel was, Ekrem Imamoğlu was their presidential candidate. But when you announce a presidential candidate, soon after comes the vision of the candidate, what the leader promises, right? Those could not come. Ekrem İmamoğlu was jailed. He was already in jail, actually, when he was announced the presidential candidate. The party was going to announce the party's program and the presidential candidate's promises for Ekrem İmamoğlu, but that delayed. The delay obviously had to do with the party's energy shifting to fighting these unjust trials or politically motivated trials, I would say. So I think on the one hand, these rallies help Özgür Özel and CHP to show their resilience, but they are also distracting them from focusing on other issues that are important for the voters, such as the economy, number one issue. About the international Özgür Özel's invitation for international support, I would say. He invited, I think he invited Western politicians, political actors to form a democratic coalition and, not necessarily support the opposition, the Turkish opposition, which sometimes backfires, as Özgür Özel mentioned in that speech. Conservative groups in Turkey are quick to accuse CHP to, to cooperate with the West against Turkish interests, for instance, speak badly about Turkey, speak badly about the government. But so I think that's not what he wants. He doesn't want democratic opposition in the West to say they support Turkish opposition. But I think what he's trying to say is that he's disappointed that some Western political actors are being too tolerant about these politically motivated trials. The gestures, some of the gestures they provide that allow AK Party to look powerful, like the support. Remember how Barack said America gave legitimacy to Erdogan, right? I mean, sometimes
U.S. envoy Tom Barack, yeah.
Sometimes we can say that for European figures too. Think about it's an old example, but 2015 elections when Angela Merkel visited right before the elections, and it was very critical elections. Erdogan could lose at those elections, and she visited Turkey right before elections to support Erdogan in a way. Those gestures that allow the incumbent coalition to look powerful and supported by the West. I think that is, and now, that kind of support is even higher, right? I mean, in earlier terms of the AK Party, some countries or some leaders like Merkel, typically and repeatedly supported Erdogan, directly or indirectly, probably part of a deal about Turkey accepting Syrian immigrants and becoming a buffer so they wouldn't, move to Europe. Nowadays, again, maybe about Syrian issue, like the Turkey's potential role in Syria is a reason that motivates some Western political figures to cooperate with Erdogan, and that's why tolerate these politically motivated trials, arrest of Ekrem İmamoğlu and other opposition politicians. I think that's what he's criticizing, and I think he has a point there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and to wrap, we have a little bit more time. I just wanted to ask about how you view Erdogan's plan here, because Turkey's a democracy. You need to have elections. People expect elections, but we're seeing these investigations continuing on the main opposition candidates or potential candidates. Do you have any guesses as to what is Erdogan's vision for the current moment in Turkey, and how much should we listen to Bahçeli, because he varies on his messaging between let's end these trials very fast and also calling CHP a disgrace for bringing the protests into parliament or having different versions of protests in Turkish politics. How do you view this balance between Erdogan and Bahçeli, and what are their goals here?
Um, I think the first part is about whether we should expect democratic elections. Well, after March 19, a lot of people thought maybe we'll not see the ballot box um, on its scheduled term because, I mean, the whole process, the arrests, clearly backfire. So if we would have elections um, with Ekrem İmamoğlu, the opposition's candidate, being in jail, Erdogan would lose. So his only option is not to bring the ballot box on the table. So so a lot of people were really worried about the prospects of elections, and even the pseudo-democratic elections, partly democratic elections that Turkey had until then, maybe would not take place in future. That's what a lot of people thought. I don't know now. I mean, the first question was about, today you first asked me about Mansur Yavaş's potential arrest, right? So you may think that the government or incumbent figures, they still think that there will be elections if they are trying to eliminate, if some people think of or prefer eliminating Mansur Yavaş from an electoral race. You may think that means the plan is to have elections. So I don't know, like a lot of uncertainties, but I guess then we can expect to have elections, but with opposition figures, the most popular opposition figures in jail. What kind of elections would they be? Probably then, like, aside from the fact that opposition figures being in jail clearly will jeopardize the level of democracy, I think in elections in that case, even like with hindrance of democracy, I think we would see a lot of reaction at the ballot box against the government. So this is the confusing part. I mean, you put opposition figures in jail, but that backfires at the ballot box. So that pushes autocrats to further autocratize the political system. Because people do react in Turkey. It's not yet like in Russia where people move to apathy in greater numbers. I think since March 19, apathy even declined. People are angry. They wait for the elections to come and show their reaction. People may not always go to these rallies and they may not speak up, but they are waiting for the ballot box to come, whether Mansur Yavaş is in jail or Ekrem İmamoğlu was in jail or not. If the ballot box comes, they will show their reaction. So, and I don't know how the incumbent coalition plans to have elections under the circumstances. So I don't know what they think about this. How um, it's very risky. It's a very risky move to put popular opposition figures in jail and then still have elections. So about AKP-MHP coalition, I mean, just very shortly, maybe. I mean, there's more to say maybe, but I will just say sometimes people say because of their disagreements, because of their disagreements becoming more obvious or deeper, such as about the peace process, the coalition may collapse. I don't agree with that. I think the coalition, AKP-MHP coalition, would not break because the two parties may have different ideas, different visions. This is not how autocratic coalitions end. They don't end because coalition partners develop different ideas about things. That idea that democratization or end of authoritarianism starts with cracks in the autocratic coalition, that's a sort of an old-fashioned knowledge, old-fashioned approach to democratization, something we inherited from like military autocracies, like military takes power, military is in power. These authoritarian systems are really vulnerable to internal cracks, internal disagreements, because like any crack, any conflict could easily lead to a civil war, right? So at the first sign of internal conflict, military would choose to go back to the barracks, because staying in power becomes too risky. So this is why we learned that when internal cracks start in an authoritarian system, authoritarian party, democratic transition may follow. But recent, more modern authoritarian systems, more like personalized or one-party authoritarian systems, they are much more resilient towards internal conflicts, because staying in is everything, being out is nothing. Like, you win so much when you're in, and you lose so much when you're out. So there's, in the case of MHP, there's all kinds of incentives to stay in, simply because they think differently about something. That's not a reason to get out of that coalition. That coalition may, however, end. We may see them separating if the coalition itself loses popularity. I think if MHP would continue to observe AKP votes declining, or the coalition's support rate declining, like it has been since March 19, that could lead to a decision to maybe align with CHP, maybe around Mansur Yavaş's leadership, So the coalition wouldn't end because of an internal conflict. It could, however, end if its support base erodes further, So one of them would jump out before the whole coalition loses its popularity. So I guess that's my short and only
Well,
partial answer to your question.
it's much appreciated. I know you have to go, and it's been very helpful to talk about these topics because, again, you don't see much international coverage on Turkish democracy these days. There's a lot going on, and Turkey Recap, we focus on what's happening here in Turkey. So thank you for your comments. For those who joined late, I've been talking to Seda Demiralp, a professor of political science and chair of the International Relations Department at İşek University in Istanbul. Thank you again, Seda, for joining us.
Thank you.
And thank you to our listeners. If you missed part of this live show, you can find the full recording on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and those other outlets. I'll provide the links, and you'll see the post there in an hour or two. This podcast is a production of Turkey Recap, a newsletter on Turkish politics, foreign affairs, and business. Visit turkeyrecap.com for more coverage from right here in Ankara. Stay safe. See you next time, and good luck with your rest of your day. Thank you.